Sure that I'm recording. Cool. Got the recording on. So yes, welcome everybody to the Free Yourself from the Cycle of Debt workshop, brought to you by our SuSu Lending Circle program. Thank you. In case you're not familiar, everybody cohort member looks like. I'm not sure of the 510 number. Let me know in the chat. Is everybody familiar with our SuSu program? Is it anybody new? I only don't know the number. Everybody's familiar. Okay, hey new. What's up with it? Well, how you doing with East Oakland Collective? You know, a millennial cohort of folks, native East Oakland people, and just supporters from other areas of the Bay. And yes, we convene around economic empowerment, neighborhood transportation planning, and homelessness service and solutions. And so this SuSu Lending Circle program is part of our economic empowerment initiatives. And so the point of the program is to kind of get us in touch with our West African, get us our African traditions of how we used to deal with money and pool resources. And so since we Black folks, African folks, have been traditionally kind of redlined or kind of gate kept out of the traditional means of financial resources, we've created our own ways of lending money with each other. And so SuSu is what it's called in West Africa. It's called different things across the globe from different countries. So the concept is a certain group of people. It can be a family, a village, a tribe, or whatever. In our case, just some like-minded individuals that want to build health, wealth, and a better neighborhood. And so yeah, we're coming together. And we're coming together again with the idea of coming to pull our resources. And in this case, the resource is money. And so we are all putting in X amount of dollars into the pot a month, and that pot rotates, and that money rotates to each member each month. And that's the way that the lending circle works and operates traditionally. The kind of new age additional way is to kind of digitize it. So the lending circle has kind of been digitized in a way where now we can do it country across the state, but we want it to be more intimate. So we're lending with people right here from East Oakland. And so, yes, we're all pulling resources together. One person get the pot, is digitized now. And what's about the more digital version is now each month that you put in money and you get it back is to the credit bureaus. Depending on which platform you use, is reported to all 3 credit bureaus or just 1 or 2. But nevertheless, each time that you are paying on your loan, it's being reported to the credit bureau. So being in this lending circle helps you build your credit, it helps you build community, and it helps you build savings. And that's what it's all about. So I'm glad to have you, Amanda. Yeah, glad to have you, Amanda, and anyone else who may be new. How do you spell the term SuSu? We spell it SuSu. I've also seen it spelled SOU. You can check out if you know this Jadena. He has a song called SuSu. He tries to break it down in a nice modern way on how he kind of mix saving money, other stuff. And yeah, check that out if you get it. But yes, SuSu, I dropped it in the chat. There you go. All right, so now that I'm familiar with that brings us here in the first place. Collective, we do more than just have a lending circle. So our lending circle is that's one part of our program. And the second part is the monthly financial workshops that we have to help build financial literacy in our community. And so this month, our workshop is called Free Yourself from the Cycle of Debt. And we have here, this is Terry Banks to come and talk to us about, yes, how we can help you do that. And before I let Terry just dive in and out of game, let you hear a little bit about Terry. And so, yeah, Terry Banks specializes and guiding professionals and to efficiently manage their finances paycheck to paycheck to achieving their definition of financial freedom. Terry started Bank on It financial coaching after heeding encouragement from friends who benefited from years of her and she learned along her way of her journey, financial freedom. Through trial and error, she pioneered her way through not knowing if she would ever be tired to having the option of retiring early. When she's not helping others conquer their money fears and tap dreams, Terry enjoys stand-up comedy, reading, gardening, and savoring tequila. Hey. So without further ado, Terry, give us some game on how we can free ourselves from that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle.
All right, thanks, Keita, for that introduction. Appreciate it. So welcome, everybody. Before I begin, I want to extend a thank you to the East Oakland Collective for hosting this event, and of course, Darby Howard and Tori Johnson for inviting me to speak with all of you today, and Keita for facilitating today as well. I'm really excited to be here, so let's jump right in. You know, for those of us who are not born with a silver spoon in our mouths, still fairly common to be the first in our family to go to college and or make on paper what could be considered good money, right? It's because of this pioneering that we may not have folks in our inner circle, be they family, friends, that have experience with how to best manage their finances. We don't have the opportunity to lean on them for guidance and to leverage their learnings and life lessons. And that's a major part of why it's important for me to do this work. I want to destigmatize us not somehow magically knowing the ins and outs of personal finance, even though it's not taught in schools. Also want to bring context and joy to this topic that can be so daunting and stressful. So basically, I'm that judgment-free auntie that you can confide in that'll keep a secret and keep it real. As you heard in the introduction, I like to laugh and sip tequila. No tequila tonight for me, but I'm planning to have fun and I hope that you are too. Our time together will be interactive, so be ready to participate. I recommend that you grab a pencil and paper. Tonight, our focus is on being a resilient consumer. Other than investing, being free of consumer debt is one of the best ways to be financially healthy. Shifting from negative net worth to positive net worth doesn't happen in a vacuum, just as winning the lottery doesn't equate to happiness. In fact, many lottery winners find themselves dealing with divorce, bankruptcy, and a whole host of other issues because of that windfall. So what can we do to help money help us? And that's what we'll cover tonight in these segments. Laying the foundation, finding and funding the yes, saving as a tool to build wealth, being a smart consumer, the other side of the coin, mindset, know your why. There'll be time after each segment for questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, Q&A, or unmute during that period. So first participation part, go ahead and type in the chat one word to describe how you'd feel if you were debt-free. Yes. I love it. Freedom, relieved, exhilarated, mobile. Yes. Freedom. Yes. All right, let's see what we can do to get you there. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to take a little time to share a bit about my journey and what led me to become a financial coach. If you're free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, your job is to empower somebody else. This quote by Toni Morrison haunted me for years because I'm a shy introvert. The last thing I wanted to do was become a face of a company. But after a while, I started feeling empty and guilty about withholding all the things that I'd learned. So finally, pulled up my big girl panties, started Bank on It financial coaching. Now I'm here to make my mess my message. So let me tell you a little bit about my mess. In my 20s, I made some not so smart choices that led to debt. I'm 49 now. Around 30, after breakup, I began digging myself out of that hole, both emotionally and financially. So lots of me time and free or very low cost activities. I spent a lot of time at the library, and I started studying personal finance to learn about how money works. I quickly realized that I had some unlearning and relearning to do. Now, it didn't take long before I became fascinated with how wealth building worked and made a promise to myself when I was able to put into practice some of these things that I learned about, that I would do it. Now, if I could scrimp and sacrifice to pay off debt, then I could scrimp and sacrifice for myself after those debts were paid. And I kept that promise, and that changed the trajectory of my life from not knowing when I would ever be able to retire to having the option of early retirement. I became serious about getting my stuff together to avoid having to eat cat food as an elder. Now, about the early retirement thing, I have no plans to retire from coaching because it's my passion. It fills my heart and it makes my soul glow. So now that you know why I coach, I want to share who I coach. I specialize in guiding professionals to efficiently manage their finances so that they can shift from being frustrated with living paycheck to paycheck to achieving their definition of financial freedom. So I coach singles, couples, and small businesses, nonprofits, and affinity groups at larger companies as an employee benefit or perk. And I help those professionals to refocus, gain control, and set a plan. The plan is not just for saving and debt elimination, but to integrate lifelong wealth building systems and behaviors. So as we dig into freeing yourself from the cycle of debt, I want to paint a picture of holistic financial health. That's why the foundational work that I do with my clients is 4 parts. Now, there are 3 main areas of focus related to dollars and cents. That's budgeting, saving, and being a smart consumer. And then there's a 4th element, which is mindset. And that's both a separate topic and it's woven throughout. I also coach beyond these foundational elements as well, but for now, I'll focus on the foundational work by elaborating just a bit about each of these areas. So for budgeting, that's to get an understanding of what's coming in and what's going out and when. Budgets have been negatively credited with taking the fun out of life when in reality, they provide clarity and empowerment. They help us to find and fund the yes. Saving is basically about preparing for the unplanned and the planned. But the way I do it with my clients is we focus on the unplanned, the irregular, but predictable, and the planned. The third is how to be a smart consumer. In this area, we learn about different types of debt in the lending industry with a focus on credit cards. So there's the credit, compound interest, which is using compound interest to strategically reduce and eliminate consumer debt and then converting that knowledge into building equity and wealth. And finally, mindset. How to put your passion behind the numbers in your budget, savings, and debt elimination to create hope, resilience, and long-term healthy habits. So you put those 3 together with the mindset, you've got to coordinate. So let's dig into budgeting. The aspect of a budget that's most commonly focused on is what comes in and what goes out. So that's the income and expenses. But often what's missing is when the income and expenses happen. When the timing is off, on the when is when Peter gets robbed to pay Paul. You might actually have more paycheck than month, but without the clarity of what's due when, it can be stressful to have more month than paycheck. It can be as stressful as having more month than paycheck. I often refer to the type of budgeting that I do and that my clients adopt as a spending plan because it's a living document that's customizable, proactive, intentional, and flexible. So my focus of late has been on learning Spanish. I'm learning Spanish in preparation for my move to Mexico next year. So you can miss me with the noise about budgets being restrictive and taking the fun out of life. Anyway, there are two words in Espanol that rhyme, that relate to the essence of budgeting. That's cuánto, which is how much, and cuándo, which is when. I just found it interesting that those words rhymed. And for me, I see it through the lens of money. And currently, I have two spending plans, one that I'm using now and one that I'll be using after I move. But because I'm being proactive, I've already done the research on how much I expect my living expenses to be after I move. So right now we're experiencing inflation and the price of things going up. A dollar can't buy what it could just a year ago. So if you don't have a working budget in place, you're overspending and you don't even know where. So a budget is like guardrails. There's also the stress of not having a budget. And then there's using a budget for stress reduction. Of course, rest and relaxation can be free. However, if it does have a cost, plan for it by adding it as an item in your budget. There are at least two reasons to do this. One, you won't be spending money on a spa day that may end up stressing you out because you don't know if you actually have the money for it. And two, if it's part of the budget, it's more likely that you'll make it happen because a budget can also act like a checklist. And you'd have something to look forward to. So imagine knowing that that massage is coming up, that whatever it is that you enjoy is coming up. So here's a testimonial about budgeting from a client named Andrea. I felt nervous going into my first session, which involved sharing my best attempt at a budget for the coming month. Fortunately, Terry's patient, non-judgmental, and encouraging. Now, as I get ready for my second session, I have next steps and homework that should set me up to save for goals I didn't think I could afford. Now, before working with me, Andrea hadn't taken a vacation in years because she thought she couldn't afford it. But since working with me, she's already taken one vacation and is currently planning two more. So she is putting her rest and relaxation right into her budget. So right now is our opportunity for questions. I want to check in to see if anyone has anything. Again, you can put it in the chat or Q&A, or you can come off mute. All right, we're good? So this next section is about savings as a tool to build wealth. And that's when you keep and use to your advantage a portion of what you make, right? So before the pandemic, 40% of adults in the US didn't have $400 of cash on hand to cover an unexpected expense. And 61% couldn't cover $1,000. This is regardless of income. So if someone makes 50K and they spend 50K, they're in the same position as someone who makes 150K and spends 150K. They're both broke, but one of them is basic broke and the other is bougie broke. Now the magic for anyone happens when they keep and use to their advantage a portion of what they make. And that's why saving is the foundation for building wealth. It acts like insurance because if there's some risk management in there because of that buffer or cushion that it provides. Helps to reduce that panic and that haunting stress. You know, it just feels good to know that you're covered. I don't know about you, but I make better decisions when I'm not in a tizzy. It's also like being your own bank. It can help you avoid from borrowing from your 401k. There's state and federal taxes and penalties. Now, the penalties have been relaxed because of COVID, but that's not going to last forever. But even without those penalties, there's still a risk. There's the opportunity cost. You lose out if the market is not rising and you're not participating. So the way that you wouldn't be participating is if you took that loan from your 401k, so you now have less in the market, and also you miss out if you stop paying into it. So on March 23rd of 2020, the market dropped You missed out if you weren't in there for the retracement. Retracement is when the price of a stock rebounds after dropping. Savings also helps you avoid relying on credit cards. If someone doesn't already have excellent credit, then they're paying high interest to borrow that money. I've seen interest rates on credit cards 25% and higher. If something had to be put on a credit card in the first place, the chances are slim that it'll get paid off before interest starts to accrue. Now, that initial emergency leads to other problems because of compound interest. So saving is a force field that protects money from opportunity costs and paying high interest rates. And that's why I believe it's the foundation for building wealth. They say that nothing is certain except for death and taxes, but life events are also certain, and there are ways to prepare for them. So first, I'll focus on the unplanned life events. And that unplanned is likely a loss of income. And a loss of income can feel like it came from out of nowhere. But this is where the emergency fund is used to offset that loss of income. The cycle of debt can be broken by having an emergency fund. So if there's a job loss, not only can this emergency fund replace your pay, but can also give you the confidence to hold out for a better opportunity and not just take the first job offer that comes along. It gives you the opportunity to turn that lemon into lemonade. But what if you have a job, but you're unhappy at that job? But before that job started to work that last nerve, you messed around and YOLO'd and FOMO'd your way into creating golden handcuff situation. And that's where you got to keep working, because now you're living paycheck to paycheck because you're spending everything that you bring in. But when the realization of not liking the job started to set in, you use retail therapy to help take the edge off. And that's when it's kind of common for that I deserve inner voice to get louder and louder. You start soothing yourself. But then you decide to leave, but you realize you don't have the buffer to take time off between jobs to rejuvenate. So you leave the unhappy place on Friday, then you go to the happy place on Monday, dragging all that funk and stank to the next place. Another way that an emergency fund can help is if there's an illness. So what if you have to miss work, but you're not off work long enough for disability to kick in? Emergency fund can help with that. Housing change. Your roommate moves out, or what if your landlord wants to move in, and then you have to find another place to live? Coming up with a first, last, and security deposit, especially in the Bay, is very expensive. But what if you're in a relationship with shared expenses and there's a breakup? Or what if you want to exit an unhealthy relationship? Well, many people stay because they can't afford to go. All right, so on to the irregular but predictable things. These are the things that are very likely to happen, but you don't always know when it's going to happen, so it's best to be prepared. So car repairs and maintenance. Even new cars get flat tires, need oil changes, and registration. Pet care, and they come with their own set of expenses. I had a conversation with married clients who have a cat. I noticed they didn't have pet insurance. And so I asked, what was their plan if and when the cat needed care? Basically, how much are you willing to pay to keep the cat alive? And this is something that they never discussed before. So that became one of their homework assignments. And then there's the death of a loved one. There could be travel, lodging, possible extended time off. 3 days isn't always enough depending on who it is. And California has many transplants. I'm one of them. I grew up back east. So it takes me a day to get there and a day to get back. That's already 2 out of the 3 days an employer says I'm worthy of getting to mourn a loved one. Then there's travel for happy things, births, graduations, weddings. Might also include some unpaid time off, home repairs, might have an aging roof. But the nice thing for a roof, You typically get about 15 years notice. So you have plenty of time to save up for that roof replacement or repairs. Appliances, you might need new appliances. The fridge goes out, all that food is wasted, right? So there's clothes, regular clothes, vacation clothes, or happy travel. You want to get those pics for the gram. Gifts, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations. And then there are those loans that are likely gifts. So if your extended family thinks that you got it like that, they might believe that it's your responsibility to help everybody, right? I actually address this as part of my coaching because thriver's guilt is real. So then there's the planned expenses. And this is where the dreaming begins. And that's where those lifestyle upgrades come into place. So if you're not already maxing out 401k contributions, this is a good time to look into it. You could use this money for investing. Maybe you want multiple streams of income that's not tied to your retirement age. There's housing, and a security deposit, first and last month's rent, or down payment. Or maybe you already own your home and you want to renovate. Or you've been in there for a while and you just, a lot of folks have been working at home. You just get tired of seeing the same stuff. Maybe you want to do some redecorating. And then there's the car. Now notice I mentioned the car after the house. E40 and I have something in common other than loving tequila. Don't buy an $85,000 car before you buy a house. So vacations are much more fun when they're interest-free. Now, I know that I look for deals when I travel. But if I end up paying interest on them, that deal is gone. And if I'm thinking, well, the deal will offset the interest, and now I'm just paying regular costs, don't do yourself like that. Just save up for it. Be your own bank on that. Lots of folks want to travel. They want to take that gap year for grown folks. I think it's an excellent idea to travel the world while their knees and the rest of your body is still cooperating. And maybe those multiple streams of income can help pay for it. And last but not least, in my opinion, the holy grail, the option of early retirement. So, emergency fund can turn a layoff into a layup. Smile and know that the best offense is a good defense. Of course, running and gunning is more fun than defense, but riding the pine sucks. So do whatever it takes to stay in the game. I have a book recommendation. I've read this book many times. It's really helped me strengthen my saving muscle. And I know the time is precious and not everyone has the time to read a book. So I'm going to add a link in the chat to a short video. It's appropriate and even encouraged to watch it with kids if that's the best use of your time. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it basically goes through this parable of how this guy saved and was able to use that money to change his life. So here is the link to that video. So I'm wondering if you ever heard of a phenomenon called lifestyle creep. It's basically when you get a raise.
Say it again. You said lifestyle
creep.
Lifestyle creep.
Yes, CREEP, creep.
Mm-mm.
It's basically you get a raise, you start spending on wants and other lifestyle upgrades repeatedly. So you're always spending what you bring in, right? And I wanted to avoid this. So to offset the temptation, I would check in with myself after I got a raise or promotion. I'd be like, Terry, do you have shelter? Yes. Terry, do you have food? Yes. Do you have reliable transportation? Yes. Were your needs met before this raise promotion? Yes. So now, with an attitude of gratitude, I can acknowledge that I'm good I'm taken care of. And now I can take the difference between the net of what I was getting paid and what I'm getting paid now, and I direct it toward my goal via automatic transfers. And it's important to reward ourselves. So the first check or two, I'll give myself that bonus. And then also going through a couple of pay cycles, let me know how much my net pay will be. So if you are nervous about setting up automatic transfers because you're not exactly sure when all the bills hit, don't be scared. Once you have the clarity of knowing what's coming in and going out and when, you can set up automatic transfers. You just need a system that will give you the clarity and confidence that you need to pay yourself first. Here's also a tip. So in addition to funding your savings with automatic transfers from your pay, you can also use money from your bonuses, tax refunds, side hustle earnings, selling stuff, and gifts. Anyone have any questions? All right. So now we're going to move on to the next section, which is about being a smart consumer. Now listen, I know not everyone hates their job, but financial stress can have people that love their job feeling trapped. Well, 2/3 of the US economy is based on spending. 66%, that is entirely unhealthy. The pandemic laid bare how dependent this country is on us buying crap. It's impossible to live on grid and not participate in our version of cutthroat capitalism, but we don't have to cut our own throats, right? So understanding the rules of the game will make us better players. So now we're going to shift over into the overview of debt and lending. So the 5 C's of credit. It's a system used by lenders to gauge the creditworthiness of potential borrowers. So you have character, and that's reflected by the applicant's credit history. The capacity, which is the applicant's debt to income ratio. Capital, the amount of money an applicant has. Collateral, an asset that can back or act as security for that loan. Conditions, that's the purpose of the loan. The amount that's involved in the loan and the current interest rates. So for example, with conditions, during a recession, even borrowers with a 700 FICO score might not be able to access credit. So you can be doing everything that you're supposed to do, but the market in general might have tighter requirements. So credit score can range between 300 and 850, so from bad to excellent. And things that go into that the credit score is 10% of it is new credit, 15% is the length of credit history, 10% the credit mix, 35% payment history, and 30% the amount owed. So 65% of it is basically can be affected by paying your bills on time. And when you pay your bills on time, you can increase your credit score, which will then reduce your interest rate. So you can borrow money for less and keep more money in your pocket. So can't stress it enough, pay your bills on time. And if you can, pay them before the due date. All right, so the 5 C's of credit boil down to painting a picture of the trustworthiness of the borrower. So in essence, lending is based on trust. They have to trust us, even though we can't always trust them. But that's just how it works. So for secured loans, there's an asset which gives you the lowest interest rate. So basically, if what you're borrowing for can be repossessed, and the lender can make up for some of their loss if you stop paying, then the interest rate is lower. But it's also different. It's different for secured credit cards. they work differently. That's when you put up your own money to show that you can use credit responsibly. And the interest rate is still high on those because you're in prove yourself mode. And then for unsecured loans, there is nothing to repossess because there's no asset. So the interest rates are higher. Now, student loans are unsecured, but they're unique in that your wages can be garnished for them and they rarely go away in bankruptcy. And then we have revolving debt, which is when the payment fluctuates and the interest fluctuates. And that's with a credit card and HELOC. And we'll go over that more detail of that later. And then installment. And that's when you borrow a lump sum and then pay it back over time. So I'm sure everyone remembers the Great Recession started in 2008. And that caught lots of folks upside down on their home loans and not able to pay the mortgage. So lots of people lost their jobs and couldn't pay. There were others that were still working that couldn't swing it. And because many of them had subprime mortgages. And one type of subprime mortgage is the adjustable rate mortgage. It's also referred to as an ARM. And according to Investopedia, an ARM is a type of mortgage in which the interest rate applied on the outstanding balance varies throughout the life of the loan. So with an adjustable rate mortgage, that initial interest rate is fixed at the beginning, but then after that, the interest rate resets periodically. That could be, it could reset monthly or yearly. The interest rates are low now, but that's temporary because when interest rates go up, the interest rate that you got on that loan adjusts up as well. And one of the ways that I remember that these are risky loans is that I think of them as arm and a leg loan. So one of the ways that people got in trouble in the 2008 recession is they were using their homes as ATM. Now, buying a home is a major purchase, and the equity asset represents a lot of wealth. Home equity can be used to build a family legacy, like down payments for the next generation, college tuition, funds to start a business, or home improvement projects. And depending on the savviness of the homeowner, that equity can be used for other investments like real estate and stock. But unfortunately, the ability to build home equity has been challenging for Black people and people of color for a variety of reasons, including restrictive covenants, eminent domain, redlining, and predatory lending. And the HELOC is a home equity line of credit. And before the 2008 crash, you have heard about people using their homes like an ATM. They were tapping into the equity by using a HELOC. And that debt was secured by the house. If you can't repay the loan, you risk losing the house. So when the value of real estate dropped, it just got worse. Well, there's a lot of blame to go around regarding the 2008 crash. In my opinion, the industry carries most of it, starting with the credit rating agencies, because they gave risky loans higher ratings than they deserved. And then lenders were motivated to lend to underqualified and even unqualified applicants. Then those loans would be packaged together, sold in bulk to other lenders. So then banks and investors were buying and selling mortgages that would likely lead to default, which is exactly what happened in many cases. But even still, we have some power in how we handle our financial business. Borrowing money should be boring. The more interesting the loan is, the riskier it is. So the following loans are too exciting for me: high interest, variable rates, or balloon loans. Remember, the hardest target to hit is a moving target. So predictable expenses help us stabilize a budget and reduce surprises. So for context, here's some of the history of credit cards. So in the 20s, it began with store credit. So hotels and oil companies for their gas cards. And now most retailers have their own store card, but they don't rank the same in the credit score calculations as, say, a Visa or MasterCard. So avoid them if you can. And then in 1950, travel and entertainment cards came into play, like the Diners Club and American Express. And then in 58, bank credit cards. Actually, B of A was the first one here in California. And then in 1976, it was Visa. So just want to, that's not a typo. I'm going to share how we as consumers are set up to get upside down on our purchases. Now, upside down is when you buy something on credit and now you owe more for it than what it's worth. You can be upside down on your house, car, or anything that you can at least break even on when you sell it. Cars are notorious for losing their value just for driving them off the lot. Now, in the early 1970s, minimum payments were equal to 5% of the balance. Like that was the norm. That was like the industry standard. But then there was this math whiz who was also hired as a financial services consultant named Andrew Carr. And he figured out that there's a sweet spot of profitability for the credit card companies if the minimum payments were reduced from 5%. So he was able to convince one of the major issuers to reduce the minimum payments to 2%. And then when their competitors saw how profitable it was pretty much adopted by the entire industry. So by the early 2000s, 2% minimums were the new normal. Luckily, in 2006, some new federal rules took effect, and they required minimum payments to cover all accrued interest, the fees, and the portion of the principal balance. This caused many issuers to bump up their minimum payment requirements, but it still didn't go back up to the 1970s levels of 5%. So when folks aren't paying off the principal on their credit card, it just grows and grows and grows. And that's why people feel like they can't pay their debt down, especially if they're focused on paying the minimum payments and not paying it off in full every month. So there's this movie called Wall Street. Michael Douglas played this Wall Street guy, and his name was Gordon Gekko. And there's this quote, it's called "Greed is Good." And it's from the movie, and it pretty much epitomizes the 1980s. That's when credit card use began to increase dramatically because of easier access to credit. And then many people began outspending their earnings and living above their means. So they were beyond paycheck to paycheck. They were living on borrowed money. And so in addition to this new way that people were living, the 80s also had really high inflation, high unemployment, and high interest rates. There were mortgages for 18.45%. And now mortgages are around mid 4%. Imagine 18.45% on a mortgage. So keeping up with the Joneses is never good. And in this economic environment, like it was in the 80s, is even worse. And these profits were going to the credit card industry. Now, the credit card industry classifies its customers as someone that either carries a balance and makes payments, and often it's just the minimum payments, or pays a balance full in every month, pays a balance in full every month. One of the two. So they call revolvers the ones that carry a balance and make payments. But the industry has another name for someone that pays in full, earns rewards, points, miles, and other benefits. And those are called deadbeats. Now listen, when I first learned this, I had a variety of F-bombs gone off in my head, right? I can't believe that someone will call their customers deadbeats for being responsible. So if you feel in any way the way I felt when I first learned, feel free to type in the chat the first thing that popped in your head. We're all grown here. So if you find a authority to let loose, go for it. Keita, what do you think of being called a deadbeat for being responsible?
I'm trying to think about it, like a deadbeat for being responsible.
Right?
Like it sounds like some capitalistic, I don't know.
Thank you. Right?
Some reverse thinking, like just never can win, you know. Yeah, can't win for lose. Exactly. Like
Exactly. So yeah, I was definitely dropping the F-bombs. We can do a lot with those 4-letter words. Exactly, Deja. So right now, I want to go into a little bit about predatory lending.
dun, 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 dun.
Yes. Um, so usury, the definition for it is unreasonably high terms to borrow money. And the mortgage and credit card industries aren't the only places with predatory lending issues. So put your thinking caps on and let me know if there are any other examples that you can think of with some unreasonably high terms to borrow money.
Repeat that again.
So, or what can you think of any other examples of usury of when you want to borrow some money, but the terms are really high, like the interest rate up after paying? Yep, yep. That is a used to be layaway, but here, oh, payday loans. Yes, yep. Making cash advance on credit cards. That is a credit card industry. There's another one that I'm thinking about too.
Um,
Yes, auto loans. Those can be high. Loan sharks.
mm,
This is a slight variation, but convenience stores. Oh yeah, student loans. Whew. Convenience stores. So you're not necessarily buying it on credit, but the cost to do business because of that convenience is really high. So it's different if it's a convenience store because you just don't want to go, make the long haul to the grocery store. But if it's a corner store and that's all you have in your neighborhood and the prices are really high and the quality is really low, that's, as far as I'm concerned, those are some unreasonably high terms of doing business. There are company stores and they offer credit. So sometimes there'll be a remote area, the customers are dependent and there's little to no competition, like mining towns. There's some agricultural towns where there's one store and people don't have transportation, so they're stuck shopping at that one place. Another way of predatory lending is with sharecropping. So the landowner would provide land, housing, tools, seed, maybe a mule, and a local merchant or store owner, you could get on credit your food and supplies. And then harvest time, the sharecropper received a share of the crop, like a third to a half. And then landowner will take the rest. And the cropper used their share to pay off their debt to the merchant. And the reason that this was so harmful to the sharecroppers is that in many cases, The credit that they used to buy their food and supplies was high interest. The harvests were unpredictable. So if the soil was too wet one year, or the soil was too dry and the harvest didn't come in right, the sharecropper wasn't necessarily able to pay off their loan. And so it would just turn over and keep those tenant farmers and their families just in debt. And then it was compounded year on year, leaving the cropper vulnerable to intimidation and even being shortchanged. And the only real alternative was to leave, to get out from under it. And that's actually one of the reasons for the Great Migration. And in the Great Migration, there's more than 5 million Black people from the South that moved to the Northeast, the Midwest, and out to the West. And that began in 1916, picked up really heavily in the 1940s, World War I, and then lasted until around 1970. And it was so bad that folks were willing to pick up and leave their home and leave their families in hopes of making a better life. It's cutthroat capitalism. So I don't know if you guys like Grease, but I found this one kind of funny. I'm not going to sing it, even though I got the earworm songs in my head, but
I want to.
So I shared a bit about how lenders mistreat consumers. So let's look at the other part of the equation, which is how we mistreat ourselves. So not paying our bills on time lowers our credit score, and that makes future borrowing more expensive. And the money that you can pay on interest could be saved or even invested. So you can't press charges on the younger version of yourself. So stop robbing your future self, right? Now, Missy Elliott was, during an interview, she was asked why she doesn't fly private. Her answer was, she had 7 houses all paid for, no mortgage, amazing credit. How do you think I was able to be gone for 14 years? I'm blessed to still be financially okay. I'm saving my money. I plan on living for a long time, and I don't want my money to run out. Now, Missy Elliott got bank. And for her to be willing to look at the big picture, I'm definitely open to it. So Albert Einstein, this quote was attributed to him: compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So I've been mentioning compound interest a little bit throughout. Does anyone want to share a little bit what they understand about compound interest?
Feel free to come off mute.
Don't be shy. All right, I'll just go into it then. So there's good debt and there's bad debt. Now, good debt has the potential to increase your net worth or enhance your life. An example of leverage is, want to buy a house, you get the opportunity to put down 3.5% to 20% down payment on that home. This is a good side of using compound interest because you're using leverage to build equity. Now, on the other side of that is a bad debt. That involves borrowing money to purchase rapidly depreciating assets, or only for the purpose of consumption. Now, I think that my bad debt was primarily pizza. That's my best guess, since I have absolutely nothing to show for my purchases before my 30s. So when we pay compound interest on bad debt, it's a form of slavery because we are bound to our lenders. They have us. And when we get them off our backs, out of our system, we get to be a lot more free. So, have any questions about anything in that section? All right, so Deja, I noticed that you said that you never heard of compound interest. I'm gonna go into a little bit more later, but I also really encourage you to do some research on your own about how powerful it is. It is really the difference between somebody's being the victor or being the victim. It just depends on what side of it you are. And so now we're going to go into talking about the other side of it. So the other side of that coin is how to keep and use to your advantage a portion of what you make. So this, because time is an element in compound interest, the sooner you start, the sooner you begin to benefit. Now, in this scenario, there are three people. They all want to retire. They all have the goal of retire at the age of 65. And each one of them contributes $200 per month. So Jack started at age 25 and he put in $200 a month for 40 years. Jill started at age 35 and she contributed for 30 years. And then Joey started at 45 and contributed for 20 years. And these are the results. So you can see the money that they were able to earn based on those investments because of the impact that time had. And so that's one of the ways we can see how compound interest works. And if you look at it really closely between Jack and Joey, even though Joey starts contributing $400 versus Jack's $200, the doubling up still can't catch up. So he is able to grow, Joey's able to grow something, but it's just over to 100K, but it's not nearly as much as the 500K that the Jack has earned being invested for 40 years. So when I was paying off my debt at the beginning of my intentional money journey, I learned a lot of concepts and strategies that my broke self wanted to implement. And I made a promise to myself that when I put into practice, when I unbroke myself, compound interest is one of the things that I learned about, and it really did change everything. So understanding and using it to your advantage gives you the power to eliminate debt and then shift into building wealth. It's even more amazing than I could imagine. I cannot stress it enough. Make it your friend. And I have several stories I could share about myself, but I'd rather share a client success story. So Jennifer and Michael are a couple, and their goal was to buy a house. But first, they needed to pay off their debt and in order to increase their credit score. And so as they paid off their debt, credit score went up. Then they started the house search. So they had an offer accepted. Actually, they moved in October of last year. So they're about to have their 1-year anniversary on their purchase of their house. And then when they got the house, then we developed a plan based on new goals that they set that will allow them to pay off their 30-year mortgage in just over 10 years, which will save them over, the life of that loan, about $200,000. And they're both in their early 50s. And they'll be able to pay their mortgage off closer to the traditional retirement age instead of having to work until their early 80s. So them getting an intimate understanding of compound interest and how to use it to their advantage basically bought them 20 years and $200,000. So like I said, when I decided to be intentional about my finances and get out of the consumer debt that was breaking me, I chose to be broke temporarily so that I didn't have to be poor permanently. So Here's what I did for 6 months. It was a rough 6 months, I ain't gonna lie. So after that breakup, I moved into a sublet with strangers from Craigslist. I got a second job, started reading personal finance books from the library to learn how to not be broke, basically. I rode my motorcycles. That was my only transportation, rain or shine. Had to eat nutritionally dense, cheap food because everything had to fit in my backpack. I didn't have a trunk. I didn't have a car. So that meant no potato chips. That was probably the saddest thing, no potato chips. But I was definitely saving money on food because I wasn't buying junk. And then I packed my lunches for work. So I also had a payday routine. I would get paid, and then I'd pay all my non-credit card bills that were due. Then I'd go to the grocery store on my motorcycle, fill up my gas tank, and then I left $10 in my account as an emergency fund. It was ridiculous, but I left $10 in there. I paid down the credit card debt and then rinse and repeat 2 weeks later when I got paid. But I just want you to know, I would never, ever expect my clients to be that hardcore about getting their finances ordered, right? I took that route because it was all I could do to figure it out on my own almost 20 years ago. I had no idea. I didn't know there was a such thing as financial coaches. So I just did it. But luckily, my clients get to take advantage of my experience and training in order to create balance in their current life for their future life so they can enjoy now as well as set themselves up for success later. So one of the things that I found is some of the same skills that it takes to be a good investor are the same ones that it takes, takes to be an investor are the same ones that you develop as you're saving. So you create a plan, building the discipline to follow the plan, the patience to allow the plan and compound interest to do what it do. So that patience, remember, Jack was able to build up the same amount of money to 500K versus Joey at 100K because of that time element. And I'd much rather practice building the skills while I'm building up my savings to try to figure out investing, because I'd rather miss out on earning some piddly little interest than to actually lose my money practicing while investing. So if you think about it kind of in sports terms, saving is like practice and investing is like the game. So we're going to really look at compound interest in more detail and more of the effective time on it. So all three of these scenarios start with 10K. The first section is when you say you just put that 10K right into a savings account and you don't touch it for 12 years. And I don't know if you know what your interest rates are in your savings accounts, even the high yield savings accounts. 1% is being hella generous. Very, very generous. 1% is not happening right now because interest rates are so low. So put in $10,000 at the end of year 12, earned a total of $1,156.68. Not much at all. The second section is you invest that money and then you reinvest the profits the whole time, earning the 2% per month. So the same scenario is with the savings, but this is with earning 2% per month. So 24% per year. So that turns that 10K into just over 106,000. And then there's the third one that's investing and reinvesting the profits while earning 3% a month. And that's 36% per year. And there are investments with these returns. And that's part of why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But that's only part of the reason. because there are other things that are in favor of the wealthy, but not in favor of the poor. But basically how compound interest works is part of the reason that the rich get richer. So when you understand and use a compound interest to your advantage, it gives you the power to eliminate debt and build wealth. So the rule of 72 is a simple shortcut to figure out how long it takes for an interest compounded value to double. Has anyone heard of the rule of 72?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick overview of it. So it's not exact, but it's never more than about 6 months off. So if you divide 72 by your interest rate, you'll see how long it takes for that loan or the investment amount to double, which means if a credit card has an interest rate of 24%, that means that in 3 years, the unpaid principal will double. So you got to think when someone is paying, someone is earning. So if someone is paying double in 3 years, someone is earning that double. And in this case, it's a credit card after 3 years at a 24% interest rate if that principal is not being paid off. And that's why this section is called the other side of the coin. So is anyone surprised about these numbers? Or shocked or excited, can't wait until they're on the receiving end of it instead of on the paying end of it? So I definitely know that I was. And when I found this out, I was like, I'm not doing anything that's going to keep me away from getting on the good side of this, getting on the good foot. So no spoilers, but I got to tell you, the Netflix show Stranger Things with the upside down. Anybody watch Stranger Things? Some good 80s stuff in there. But there's definitely is good. Definitely is good. But I kind of draw a parallel between being in debt and being in the upside down. It mimics real life, but it's terrifying. It's definitely scary. So in my introduction, Keita mentioned that I enjoy gardening, right? So all of these jalapenos came from one seed. Last spring, I planted a jalapeno start. I harvested less than 40 peppers all season. And then over the winter, California winter, that stem transformed into a small trunk and turned woody. And so many peppers come off this bush tree. I can't use them all or give them away to neighbors and friends fast enough. This, in this picture, is a 13 by 18 baking sheet. And I harvested all of those after being on vacation for 10 days. Just 10 days with all that. But you got to think, all of this heat is from one seed. So I think that compound interest and gardening have a lot in common. Plant your seed today to start your fire. So money doesn't go to sleep, it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't go on vacation. So make your money work for you 24/7. Well, one of my favorite movies is Enter the Dragon. But I wonder if it would be my favorite Bruce Lee movie if he didn't die at such a young age. But he first inspired me as a kid, and this quote that's been attributed to him inspires me as an aunt, a godmother, and a financial coach. And that quote is, instead of buying your children all the things you never had, You should teach them all the things you're never taught. Material wears out, but knowledge stays. You know, my wife and I don't have any kids of our own unless you count my inner child. Now, we recently went through the process of working on our wills and our trusts so that our loved ones would be taken care of. As aunts and godmothers, it was important for us that we do what we can to ensure that they won't have to pioneer and struggle the way we did. As I mentioned earlier, an influx of cash can be more of a curse than a blessing. So for the younger generation to receive their share, they have to successfully go through a financial coaching program similar to the one I offer so that they can be prepared in my demise, which, like I said, that part wasn't really fun to think about, but it was important for me to do this for them. So I have a client that wanted to leave a legacy for her kid. And it's an honor for me to help my clients create generational wealth for their children, because this is bigger than me right now in this moment. But I know it starts with the willingness to believe financial freedom is possible. So Lori says, as a mother of a child with disabilities, it was important for me to work with someone who would not only understand my financial reality, but also the fact that I want to leave a legacy for my child to thrive in the future. Terry provided that support to me in ways I never thought possible, and she showed me what I could accomplish in my current situation without making me feel like I was failing. So, do we have any questions about compound interest or anything else that we just covered?
Might have to chew on compound interest a little longer.
It's big. It's a big one. So I can move on to the next section.
Yes.
Anyone doesn't have anything, it could be about compound interest, but it could be anything that we've covered thus far.
Don't be shy, y'all.
All right. So mindset. That's how we put more passion behind the numbers.
Oh,
Right.
We got a raised hand.
Oh,
Najee, you have your hand raised? Let me try to unmute you. Allowed to talk. There you go. You should be able to talk now. Can you?
Okay, hi. I had a question about the good debt thing.
yes.
Can you refresh me on what counts as good? So just low interest?
So the general thinking of good debt and bad debt is, if you borrow money, is it for something that is going to appreciate and to help you build wealth? Or go up in value? Or is it something that is losing value, that's just taking money away from you? So that's the general thing about good debt and bad debt. So for instance, buying a house is considered good debt. It's a lot of debt because homes are one of the most expensive things that we could buy. But that's a lot better than basically what I did. It was just, I guess, buy a lot of pizza on credit cards. So does that help at all?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
You sure?
Yeah, I just needed a refresher on it.
Okay. All right. So I'll head over to mindset, and that's how to put your passion behind the numbers to create long-term healthy habits. So, people with social media, it gets really hard to stay focused on yourself because you see so much else out there in the world. But prioritizing that YOLO lifestyle is like being a one-hit wonder. And for me, if something is so amazing that I'm willing to throw caution to the wind, it's probably something that I want to be able to do more than once, right? Now, memories are great, but not having anything to look forward to is soul sucking. The trick is balancing the urges of now with creating more options for the future. So budgeting, saving, debt reduction sets you up for compound living. And a really powerful strategy to overcome fear of missing out is to have an intimate understanding of your true priorities. So when a random shiny object comes along to distract you from what's really important to you, you can compare it to what you really want to see if it still matters. So when you're locked into your goal, those distractions will be like minor annoyances or even imperceptible. So my focus has been on creating financial, time, and location freedom. So anything that distracted or distracts me from that, I have no room for it in my life. So this picture is part of the plans for a 9-unit building in Mexico. It'll have ocean and mountain views. Now, these 5 stories have a gym, game room, rooftop terrace with a pool and outdoor kitchen. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because this is my dream. The building itself will be built with cinder block. So I compare every YOLO, FOMO, temptation, distraction to this. So I just ask myself, how many cinder blocks will this shirt cost me? So I can use it in terms that make sense to me. And this simple question helps me with my decision making and to keep my dream in the forefront. So know your why, and then filter your choices through your why. So when someone's like, hey, do you want to go do this? Then you know, like, oh, did I budget for it? Is it important? Do I have these other things that are a bigger priority to me? When you're looking at it in a big picture kind of way. So here's a testimonial from Rachel, who knows her why. Yes, self-discipline. So I'm checking out the time. I'm gonna skip this one. And there's a why exercise that we can go through. But I want to be respectful of time and not keep you there, but you'll have this in the recording. So then there's the why you want to have a strong why. So one of the things that I noticed is that when I first started on my journey, is it seemed like friends and family and complete strangers were taking cool vacations, buying nice cars, wearing latest fashions, talking about the meals they're having in these restaurants, right? Yeah, you'll be able to do that, to do the exercise on your own. So, oh yes, the joy of missing out. Yep. But in the beginning, it was really hard. But then one day, it just stopped being hard because I started seeing the results of my efforts, and then there was no turning back. So paid off the credit cards, emergency fund in place, down payment saved, bought our first house, paid off student loans, bought the second house. And then I realized that my plan of retiring in dignity, I ended up having the option of retiring early. And now I'm currently upgrading my plan of having the option to retire early, and shifting that, upgrading that to retiring early in paradise, right? So it's hard. Like the concept is easy, but sometimes doing it is hard. But if you know your why, it really helps you to stay on track. So Joneses and them Kardashians, they'll keep you in trouble, right? So you want to look inside for alignment and be your own Jones. So if you have a setback, you have a setback. Just start again. right? Just do redo. I mean, this whole thing is a game. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why my inner child is so important for me, because I'm a big kid, and it's a game. Just start over, and forgive yourself and be gentle. But one of the ways that I found that helps keep me on track is gratitude. So really focus on what it is that you're grateful for. So when things do seem to be heavy and you're like, oh, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, really focus on what you do have, the blessings that are already in your life. And the things that I'm grateful for is my health, my family, my friends, opportunities, and freedom. And I notice that after integrating gratitude as a practice in my life, I see more beauty, more kindness, and the little things. So the foundational things have a lot more meaning. So one of the things that I do to help myself control with impulse purchases is I mute commercials. So I'm not bombarded with messaging that tells me I'm not enough and that a product will make me whole. Does anyone have anything that they want to add, like how they try to rein in impulse purchases?
For me, it make me feel good when I bookmark stuff and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get that. And I just bookmark it and never go back to it. Like sometimes just bookmarking it is enough.
Yes, exactly. You can feel it, but it doesn't have to, take over.
In the chat.
Oh, yes, Deja. Yes. Yeah, them overdraft fees. That'll do it too. That'll do it. So for me, like, I treat stores like they're the exploratorium. So I can touch it, I can try it on, I get those endorphins, but I don't have to buy it. I don't have to go through, pull up my money to have the joy, and that's helped me come to understanding that I don't have to possess something or own something to appreciate it. I don't have to, be a colonizer in the store. I can just check it out like it's a museum. So I'm at the end here. So if anyone, you or someone else is like, I make too much money to be this broke, or I have no idea where my money went, have them go to my website. They can book a 30-minute Q&A with me. I'm going to add a link to my website in the chat.
Yes, please do so.
And thank you so much for choosing to spend your precious time with me. I appreciate it. Follow me, show me some love. I share some tips, inspiration, and other financial learnings. Here's my socials. I'll put those in the chat as well.
Hey.
So does anyone have any questions? And yes, I love referrals. Referrals are my favorite. They really are. I'm an introvert, stranger danger. So
your memes are the best. Thank you, Terry. We really
very welcome.
And enjoyed you. Everybody give her some snaps, some love in the chat, or feel free to come off mute and say thank you. Again, just really appreciate the breakdown. Yeah, and just sharing your story and how your whys and how it keeps you motivated and grateful forward. And so yeah, I'm just giving y'all a few moments right now so you can get all those links in the chat, because once I close out, they'll be gone. And just want to let you know also, once you close out, it should be a survey, an EOC survey, so that you can receive participation points for those who need so for attending today. And yeah, again, we just thank you all and see you next month at our next financial workshop. And yes, thank you again. I'm gonna be hitting you up for that one of them 30-minute free Q&As.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So it's again, want to thank you all for showing up, spending your precious time, especially after work and after the commute. And yes, the exploratorium idea, it's kept me out of trouble so many times. You know, every product is someone's dream came true. Someone had this idea and it came to life. I just look at that thing and I'm like, I just get happy for them and I get that endorphin rush. And that's it.
Mhm.
That's it. So thank you for the follow on LinkedIn.
Hey,
All right. So
thank everybody.
thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.